Carly has a good question here. She says, do you have any tips for helping parents who are very fearful of letting their kiddo try solids? They're worried about choking. You know what? It's a really good concern, and I understand where they're coming from. So often I get parents who are a little too zealous and too confident, especially with the baby-led weaning movement, and I have to kind of reel them in. But we also get the opposite that you're describing, Carly, where someone is really, really scared that that child might choke. Well, the first thing you're going to do is explain to them the difference between gagging and choking. Gagging is a natural protective mechanism that most of us have. There are a few of us who don't have a gag reflex, but most of us have a gag reflex that is there to stop food from going down the airway. Now, it is not foolproof. So we always want to keep our eye on our kids and don't rely on just gagging to keep them safe. Another thing about gagging is although we think it's a good thing, it can also be really uncomfortable. So if a child is gagging too much, they're going to develop an aversion to food. There are several articles on my blog at melaniepotock.com. Just search the tag feeding babies, and many different articles will come up about baby-led weaning, baby self-feeding, and gagging versus choking. So let's talk about choking. Choking is actually where the airway is being partially to fully blocked. Because of that, no air can get through the vocal folds, or sometimes called the vocal cords. So very often choking has no sound. That's yet another reason why we don't want to turn our back on kids when they're eating, because you won't necessarily hear them choking. You'll turn around and they'll be blue. You'll see choking. That's why you always want to keep an eye on your child. So that difference, and parents say to me, oh, she chokes all the time. When I really observe the child, it's more often that she gags a lot, because if she were truly choking, that would require the Heimlich maneuver. Another thing, though, I want all of my parents to learn to do is the Heimlich and CPR for babies so that they are ready just in case. Now, my whole career, which has been 20 something years, I've only had to do the Heimlich one time on a toddler. And it wasn't even the kid I was treating. I was in a preschool setting, and it was my very first day there. Just met the teachers, and I'm working with my little child who had a G-tube, and she's learning to eat. And the preschool had brought in Frosted Flakes, of all things, for the kids to have a snack. And it was not over milk, just to munch on. And these are little toddlers. That's not a good idea. That is not a safe food for toddlers, especially because at the bottom of the Frosted Flake box are those yummy big chunks of the Frosted Flakes that all got, it's like, oof, the best piece of all for us older people who would love all that sugar as a little treat. Well, one of the kids got a hold of one of those. And all I can tell you is I'm working with this little girl. Both of the teachers had their back turned. They were washing the dishes. They were great teachers, but they had their back turned. And all I know is I looked over, and this little kid had drool coming out of his mouth, totally going purple under his eyes, purple around his lips, literally like this. Now, the universal sign for choking with adults is this, right? But toddlers don't know that. And it just all kicked in my training. And I leapt up and I yelled, choking, ran over, flipped that kid over, gave him the Heimlich. He spit it out on the floor and gasped and started to breathe again. And you're right, that I know what you guys are thinking. They never served Frosted Flakes again in that classroom. But I'm sharing that story with you because it isn't going to happen that often, but you've got to be ready for it. You've got to be ready for it. So share that story with your families and let them know that in 20 years, I've only had to do it one time, and it was on a typical kid. So thank goodness that I was keeping an eye on everything. Keep an eye on your kids when they're eating. I want to just take this one step further, and then we'll take one more question. When we have parents who are really, really scared of their child choking, it's a good idea to sit down with them away from the child and ask them, tell me how you feel about that. Tell me a little bit more what goes through your head when you start worrying about your child choking. Because as a mom myself, I know that's really scary. Why is it that this is a special concern for you? Often it's because the child has a medical history that, possibly they do have a history of choking, but it also could be that maybe the parent had a choking episode or their sibling, when they were growing up, they witnessed a choking episode. Take a minute to really find out what's going on so that we can be empathetic to that situation and help them overcome that fear. And then finally, sometimes parents do need some extra support, maybe some counseling around their fear. And don't hesitate if you feel like you can't quite get to that next step and the parent's fear is really what's in the way of the child making progress, to suggest that, because the parents deserve to be supported as well.